Hey Team Bio, welcome back. So we're switching gears a little bit today, and we're going to talk about phylogenetic trees. Now, philo is a root that means race, tribe, or kind, and phylogeny is the study of how a species or a group of organisms has evolved over time. So a phylogenetic tree is basically just an evolutionary tree of life. It's just a fancy science way of saying that. Okay, so we've talked about some big principles in ecology, and now we're going to talk about some big principles in genetics and evolution. First, we're going to start learning how to read a very simplified tree of life. So that's our model tree up here. Okay, so here's how you read a tree. You start at the root of the tree, which I guess I should draw the arrow pointing to the very tip. This is called the root. Now, a tree you read starting from the root and then radiating up and out. And it's not really a traditional graph, but moving from the root up, this axis would be time. So if the root is a long time ago, then the very end of the tree is like right here, this area. This is present day. And A, B, C, D, and E, these are all modern day species. Now, each one of them is a unique species. But they share a common ancestor. If we look back at the root, we see that they all came from the same origin. Now, a branching point along our tree is a speciation event. And the crux of the branching point, I'm gonna, like this point right here in the center, this is the last shared common ancestor. There's a C in ancestor. A-N-C. The last shared common ancestor. So for example, if the speciation event that we see here is between Homo sapiens, humans, and chimpanzees, this would be the last shared common ancestor between the two of us. Okay, so these are all modern day species. When we go back down the length of the tree, we go back in time. Any species that's at the tip of the tree, they're living today. Any species that you see this little root or this branch has petered out and it didn't make it to modern day, this is extinction. Okay, something that I want to point out that you'll hear all the time is people will talk about species being highly evolved, and they usually mean it in a sense that the organism is maybe more complex, and they've had more evolution happen. But the reality is we all started, there's a shared last common ancestor between all of us. And so life shares a common root here on Earth. And we've all been evolving for the exact same amount of time. So to say something is more highly evolved than something else doesn't really make a lot of sense because we've all experienced the exact same amount of evolutionary time. So everything is equally highly evolved in the world. Okay, so This is just a really basic phylogenetic tree, so you get comfortable with how to read and interpret them. And then down here, we're gonna have a very simplified tree of life here on Earth. Very simplified tree of life. Okay. Life can be broken down into 3 giant categories. We call them 3 domains of life. The first domain is bacteria. Okay, I'm going to change this white one. And what else do I want to change? I'll keep the pink one. I'm going to delete this one. Okay. So, what color do I want? I want red. So one of our big domains is bacteria. So I'm going to circle this part of the figure and label it. This is bacteria. And then another big domain of life is a group called Archaea or Archaea. And that group is right here. So this is, I'm going to put it on this side actually. This is Archaea or Archaea, A-R-C-H-A-E-A. Both Archaea and bacteria are part of a grouping that is called Protista. So I'm going to circle both of them now. Circle both of these. Oh, did I say Protista? That's really wrong. Bacteria and Archaea are both part of a group which we call prokaryotic cells. P-R-O-K-A-R-Y-O-T-I-C. Prokaryotic. Karyon means seed or kernel, and pro means before. All prokaryotic cells have no nucleus. They were before the seed, before the kernel, before the nucleus. So prokaryotic, no nucleus. And they're all single-celled. They are simple organisms in that they don't have giant genomes, and they're all very tiny single-celled organisms, and they don't have any nucleus and no organelles, but they are, just like all living things, very ancient and very diverse. They're actually much more diverse than this other group over here in terms of their genetic sequences. Okay, so bacteria and Archaea both are prokaryotic. This other grouping is what we call eukaryotic cells. I guess I'll do this one in black. So eukaryotic organisms, eukaryotic organisms are probably everything that you think of when you think of living things. Here are our eukaryotes. Now, eu means true, and karyon is, again, kernel. So this is true kernel or true seed, and all eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. And within the domain eukaryote, we have 5 different they're called kingdoms, and most of them you're probably familiar with already. So the first kingdom is the plants. Here we have the plants or plantae, but we're just going to write plants. And another one everyone knows and loves, animals. You could also say animalia, but again, we're just going to keep it simple and write animals. And then we have our fungi or fungus. And then last but not least, we have this group of organisms that are not a true genetic grouping. They're not what we call monophyletic. Here we go with that word phylogeny again. By not monophyletic, I mean this last group, which is Protis or Protista. There are some organisms that we have in this group that are actually more closely related to plants. So like, for example, algae. We call them protists, but they're more closely related to modern day plants. They're actually they're the most common ancestor of modern day plants. And amoebas are examples of organisms that are more closely related to animals. And I don't know, maybe there's some slime molds that are more closely related to fungi. But the point of this little piece, this is Protis, is that protists are like a false category. They're not a true genetic grouping. Now, one thing that they have in common is they're all single cell. Protists are single-celled. And the reason why they're grouped together is because the name and the category predates genetic sequencing. Now, with the advent of genetic sequencing, we can take any organism, sequence its DNA, and then see how closely related it is to other things in the tree. It makes it very easy to create an accurate tree of living things. However, before we were able to do this, the only way we could categorize things was by how they looked. And so protists hail from a time where these categories were created using microscopes and seeing what things looked like. So these protists, they look more like one another than they maybe do plants, animals, or fungi. So they were put into a group, but it's a false group. Okay, and then last, I guess the thing we have to label on our tree is our root. And this actually is the origin of life. Okay, so that's our very, 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 very simplified tree of life. See you later.